I have to say, for an episode of Girls Last Tour that started off as one of my least favorite episodes of the series, this ended as my favorite episode of the series. I really liked the overall idea it was going for. There was a lot I didn't like within the first half, a lot of the bathing stuff, and just, I knew what they were going for there. However, once we got into that second half and it kind of got in the idea of empathy and what it means to be alive, that's when this episode really sold me and really sticks out as being one of the best, if not the best, of Girls Last Tour. The idea of just like this whole robot facility, one robot's whole duty is to pretty much show people around and feed the fish, where the other robots, these giant ones, are essentially dismembering the facility and kind of just tearing it down in order to preserve the town. But what makes this episode so interesting is it comes down to what it is that makes something living. What is life truly? And the answer that they come to by the end is life is something that has to end, which is, I think, the best way to describe it, to be 100% honest, because in this episode, we really have the option of, do we let this robot continue to just break down the facility, killing the one fish that is still alive, as well as more than likely this little robot, or do we blow up the giant robot and let them continue for a little bit longer? I thought it was interesting because you would think that you wouldn't have any attachment to this giant beast that is trying to dismember the facility, but there's a moment in this episode where the robot just looks at the camera pretty much, and even though you can't see facial expressions, you get a sense of almost like sadness, like don't kill me, and then the apology, and then they blow up. And it's so interesting because it's a matter of what type of life do you want to preserve? Do you want to preserve the one fish as well as the small robot, or do you want to preserve the giant robot? And I think it comes off if you just explain it as so silly, but when you see it executed by the time this episode wraps up, you really get an attachment of like, damn, this series can go deep when it wants to, and I think that's one of this series' greatest strength, is it can just be a very fun slice of life series, but it can also be quite deep and actually pose questions that you might be able to apply in your everyday life, because it kind of starts off as like, what if a machine came up and said hi? And then when that ultimately happens, it's pretty funny. I actually didn't see that coming. But it's a matter of like, what does it mean to be living? And this episode really poses that question because you're following a robot who has empathy programmed into his system. So of course, it just starts to change your perspective, and you're starting to see that there's one fish left, something that they didn't think they would ever see. The only fish that they've seen is like these frozen ones half the time. I thought it's interesting of, like, the route they were trying to take the viewer on to really, it's not really saying, like, what's right or wrong. Should you let the fish die so this robot can just kind of tear down the facility, or should you actually destroy the robot in order to preserve this robot's life? And that's such an interesting concept because it's really not really trying to make you think one way is right or wrong, just kind of the idea of what it means to be living, especially in a day and age when we're trying to progress technology further and further, make AI more advanced than ever before. It's interesting to see this episode really tackle it, and it just kind of makes you like sit back and think there isn't really a right answer to the end goal there. Like, personally, I thought they were going to go the route of they were going to take the fish and maybe like a glass container and the fish would kind of travel with them. But I did find it, like, even more fitting the way they did finish the episode with literally destroying the one robot. But it's interesting to see what they were posing with the question of life, and I think the definition that they gave life was probably the best outcome they probably could have went for. And this episode was just engaging. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of the first half, but by the time this episode wrapped up, I think this definitely is the best episode of the series. I think this episode in just series is so interesting. Like, I never get a sense that things are dangerous or the characters are going to have life or death situations, but I think when they apply it such as this, where you do have a life or death situation, but not towards the characters, but more or less sentient beings as well as a single fish, it's interesting how attached they can get you, and you kind of don't want either outcome to happen. That's an interesting thing, because usually I don't get this attached to a series, especially a slice of life one, but I'm always so engaged with a series, and I can't wait to see where this is going to go next week. Really excited to see just ultimately if we're going to have any more episodes that really are going to push that question, what is the right or wrong answer for something like this? I don't expect so, but like still, great episode. Like, what are you guys thinking? Like, if you were in that situation, what would have you done? Would you have let the robot continue to tear down the facility, or would you do the same thing, blow it up so the fish could live? I'm sure some people don't care as much as I do about this kind of question, but I found just the look on the one robot's face before he got blown up, it just made me think like, damn, he doesn't deserve that fate. But that's just me. But let me know your thoughts, and before I leave, smack that like button, share your support. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.